Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And I'll start with questions. And I ask that if other members have opening statements, please submit them for the record so we can get the majority of our questions in. And basically, my question is, I mean, it's fairly simple, and I'm just looking for reasons why we can't. We seem to have a gap here, and we hear in testimony every single week from bankers that come in here and they tell us they've got money to lend. And in fact, it's kind of, with the fact that I pointed out and the ranking member pointed out too, even with the Small Business Lending Fund, that we've only seen a portion of that, or at least a few banks apply for it. But banks say they have money to lend, and yet we have small businesses come in here every single week also and tell us they can't get capital. And we're trying to find a reason for that. And do you have any ideas, thoughts? What is causing the problem here with this divide that nobody seems to be able to cross?
Well, Mr. Chairman, that's the right question, and then I'll give you my sense. And of course, like you, I talk to small business across the country all the time, and I hear the same things. People still say it's very hard to get credit. We think we deserve it. We should be able to have access to it. Banks were throwing money at us before the crisis, and now it's dried up. We think that's unfair. It's hurting our capacity to expand and invest. Many of them say that, we're just on the verge of being able to, we're seeing more demand for our products. We'd like to meet that demand, but we can't do it unless we have more working capital. So I think you're absolutely right about the nature of the problem. And I think the way to explain why it still feels that bad is just to remind people that the crisis caused a huge amount of damage. It's going to take years for us to dig our way out of that hole. A lot of the damage was concentrated in construction, where a lot of small businesses operate. And the credit damage caused by the crisis hurt a lot of small banks' capacity to lend and hurt a lot of the classic lending channels that small businesses rely on. So I think those are the best explanations for why it still feels so bad. It is fair to acknowledge that examiners across our banking agencies, state and federal, are trying to be more careful. They look back at the experience of the judgments they made on the run-up to the crisis. They felt they were behind the curve in lots of ways, and they are being very careful. Now, it may be too careful in some ways. The typical thing you see in recessions, coming out of recessions caused by financial crises, is that there's a risk that supervisors and examiners overreact. And after a period of maybe being a little too loose, they tend to overdo it. And so I think it's very important, as we try to make sure these programs reach as many people as we can, that the federal banking agencies continue to try to give their examiners more balanced guidance. So again, they don't make these problems unnecessarily worse by overdoing it. They should be cautious, they should be careful, but they don't need to overdo it.
We're actually, we hear some of that, exactly what you said when it comes to the examiners. They're either requiring more equity for the same line of credit on a business that's never missed a payment, or they're lowering their line of credit, the same equity, the reverse. Yeah. But do you think that small businesses out there are, and one of the things that I worry about too is small businesses just sitting on cash that they may have too. And do you think that the concern over the deficit or the concern over the debt is hampering that growth, or do you think that small businesses are holding back just as a result of that alone?
I think it's a good question. That we have a bunch of surveys that some of you cited that we use as a measure of what small businesses say their main challenges are. And I think those surveys have consistently said throughout the crisis that the biggest challenge they face, the biggest source of uncertainty, is over how much growth and demand for their products they're going to see. And although we've had now about 18 months of positive growth, because the crisis was so traumatic and caused so much uncertainty, so much damage, this is something that most Americans had never experienced before in their lifetime, never thought they'd experience. And that has lasting damage to confidence. And people are a little more tentative, given the shocks caused by the crisis, about how strong growth is going to be in the future. That seems to be the main effect. However, having said that, I agree very much that if Congress can find a way to reach a bipartisan, comprehensive, balanced agreement to bring down our long-term deficits, that would help. It would be a sign that Washington works, is able to try to come together and solve some problems. And I think that would improve overall confidence across the country. Of course, how we do that is very important. As I said at the end, it's important not just to bring more gravity to our fiscal position, demonstrate that we can live within our means, but we have to do that in a way that's going to be good for growth, good for the economy in the near term and good for the economy in the long run. And that's a complicated challenge.